My CAPSTONE Project, Diagnostic Assessment and Targeted Intervention in Secondary English Classrooms. So what is the problem? The problem that I see is that low EOC and SAT reading scores in secondary schools may be a sign of undiagnosed reading deficits. Reading deficits are something that are usually seen and dealt with in the elementary school and middle school level and not really talked about in high school as much as I believe it should be. The solution: diagnostic reading assessments paired with intentional targeted intervention can improve reading comprehension and word recognition skills, therefore improving student literacy. So let's look at some of the literature and research that I focused on for this project. There are 4 things that I will discuss: reading deficits in high school, diagnostic assessment, reading intervention programs, and reader response theory. Lindsay Harris, a former research assistant at George Washington University, mentions that half of the incoming 9th grade students in a high school where she conducted a study in the Words Their Way program are from high-poverty urban schools and read at a 6th or 7th grade level. Now, while my own experiences are not quite this severe, I do see a lot of incoming students with a much lower reading level than they should be at. So where do we begin with intervention? In order to create an effective literacy in our intervention program, teachers need to build data and knowledge about students' reading, word recognition, and spelling abilities regardless of grade level. Daryl Morris, the director of the Reading Clinic at Appalachian State University in North Carolina, discusses the limitations of standardized testing in his book, Diagnosis and Correction of Reading Problems, pointing out that standardized tests alone have a limited ability to diagnose and inform corrective instruction. So while standardized tests do give us a good idea of where our students are at as far as compared to their peers, it does not break down the real issues that they may have, whether with reading comprehension or other issues. There are intervention programs available for upper level grades, though many of them have been modified from corrective reading programs at the elementary or middle school level. An example of this was what I previously mentioned, Words Their Way, and also Read 180. Now, Read 180 is a high yield program. However, unfortunately, in many school districts, it costs a lot of money, and the resources for this are very limited, and therefore classes are very small. Amanda Woodruff and Robert Griffin, authors of Reader Response in Secondary Settings, Increasing Comprehension Through Meaningful Interactions with Literary Texts, believe that the reader response theory and strategies such as reader response journals, reading workshop, and literature circles are essential in providing students with targeted intervention where needed, whilst simultaneously providing them with a way to engage with text in a meaningful and authentic way. So let's take a look at my specific project. So my problem is the same problem that I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. Our school district, and our school specifically, has a lot of very low English scores, reading comprehension scores, and SAT reading scores. I did implement diagnostic reading assessments paired with intentional targeted interventions, the ones that I mentioned earlier. So that meant SSRs, Socratic seminars, and things like that, in an effort to increase and improve my reading comprehension and word recognition skills. So some things that I did gather data using informal reading inventories paired with standardized assessments. I did select appropriate reading intervention strategies, and I used things like the reading workshop method, Socratic seminars, and direct teaching of reading strategies in order to increase engagement and reading comprehension skills. So the demographics in my school specifically, there are 4,200 students, and this number changes at any given time because it is a very highly mobile district. Students move a lot. 76% are economically disadvantaged, I believe 72% of our students are also considered at risk, and 22% are identified as LEP, limited English proficient. In my own test group, my own classroom, 90 of my students are pre-AP students, 2 identified as English language learners, 60 of my students are on level, and 13 are identified as English language learners. About half of those students are on the high scale, advanced high. The other half are either intermediate to advanced. So my initial data, there's a lot of data points here initially because I really wanted to get a good idea of what my students were working with. I did use a Macmillan Reader's Level Test, which is an online diagnostic assessment of language and grammar skills. 41% of students scored upper intermediate, 45% of students scored intermediate, and 14 scored below elementary or below. The STAR results from the previous year are broken down into 5 quintiles, and 11.5% of my students are in the lower 2 quintiles, and that is something that I was concerned about. This information paired with the Macmillan reading test gave me a better look at what I was dealing with, what my students were dealing with. For my IRI, the results were not promising. More than half of students scored less than 75% on the diagnostic. I did create the diagnostic from Animal Farm, 250 to 500 words from Animal Farm, which is a text that they were going to read that semester. But according to the results of the diagnostic, the text was at most students' frustration level, or at many students' frustration level. And that was concerning to me because that meant that I would have to scaffold a lot and work a lot with my more frustrated students. So another data point was a district common assessment. This is an assessment that we give once a semester. And the DCA results are actually quite a bit lower than the STAR results. And that could be for many reasons, not least of which is the fact that students have, been coming back from summer and things like that. And so they're just getting into the groove of school. But this number did also concern me because 36% of my students are at quintile 3 and below. So my targeted interventions. One of the things that I really wanted to do was have silent sustained reading every day. I was unable to do that, but I was able to do it 3 days a week, 15 minutes per day. Students choose a book of their own liking, and they read for 15 minutes a day, and then they're encouraged to respond to that book in different creative ways. We assess inference skills in small groups with close reading, exploring theme through truisms, guided reading questions, Socratic seminars, and the list goes on. And this picture here is an example of a Socratic seminar that we did recently in class for Julius Caesar. So truisms to theme. So theme is something that was a real big issue when I broke down the district common assessment results. Theme was one of the things that our students were not getting. So in order to break that down, I created truism statements, and the students were encouraged to respond to them and pull out their favorite sentence. And so what you see on the board are those results, unedited, and it really helped the students understand what a theme statement is and also how to respond to theme statements in ways that are not trite. This is also the form that we use, the rubric that we use to assess inferencing, and some of the guided reading questions that were used in my classroom. So my results. As far as the district common assessment goes, we took another one on the 21st of January of this year, and their results are obviously very different. So quintile 5, the top couple students in my class, the top scoring, increased from 37 to 45%. So that is an 8% increase, which is amazing. And then the other quintiles have also decreased by 1%, which means that in general, students are moving up, and that's really wonderful. Some conclusions. So there are some things that worked and some things that did not. Immediately, I can think about the IRI, and that was my own mistake. So when I created the common assessment, the diagnostic assessment, I used a piece of Animal Farm that was very highly dependent upon context within the text, and therefore, I think that was really why the results were so low and so skewed. Although part of it was because I had students who struggled a lot with that text and struggled a lot with reading comprehension and inference, because that is really a big part of that text. I did use the Macmillan Reader's Level test, and I think that that gave me a good idea of where their grammar and language skills were, although it was very limited because it only gave me up until upper intermediate. So I wish that was a little bit better. Student growth is clear, but it is minimal. And I think part of the reason for that is that I was not able to implement everything that I wanted to on a regular basis. I realize now, as I have been working through this project and implementing in my classroom, that one or two improvements, one or two changes is doable. All the changes that I wanted to do are not doable in one year, in one go. However, they obviously are working. The Socratic seminars, the guided reading, those really are working. And I do wish that I could have done some more small group interventions. I wanted them to happen 3 times a week, and that was not possible. Again, due to scheduling, it is, I have a lot of students, and it's high school, so there's a lot of things going on. So, but I do think that this was a very valuable thing to implement in classroom. I will definitely continue working on this and continue improving. Diagnostic assessment was something that was absolutely necessary in classrooms like mine, where I have students of so many different levels and students who come from different countries or different backgrounds where they might not have been diagnosed for deficits in reading beforehand. Here are my resources. Feel free to look through them. And that is it. Thank you very much and have a wonderful day.